The dirt under Penelope Vaughn's bare feet was so hot, it might have been coals. But she had learned long ago not to cry out, not to show weakness, not to draw attention to herself in any way that might make things worse. She was 19 years old and had never owned a pair of shoes that fit properly, never tasted anything sweeter than wild honey stolen from a hive, never felt fabric against her skin that did not scratch or chafe. The Arizona Territory in 1878 was unforgiving to everyone, but it was especially cruel to a girl with no family and no prospects, working herself to the bone in a trading post outside Yuma, where the owner paid her in stale bread and the privilege of sleeping in the storage room. She was carrying water from the well when she first saw him. Ethan Quillan rode into the settlement on a horse that looked as wild as he did, all muscle and barely contained power. He was a mountain man. That much was clear from the furs strapped to his saddle and the rifle slung across his broad back. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and his forearms, visible where he had rolled up his sleeves, were corded with muscle that spoke of years hauling traps and wrestling with nature itself. His jaw was covered in a thick beard, and his eyes, when they swept across the trading post yard, were the color of storm clouds over distant peaks. Penelope froze with the bucket in her hands, water sloshing over the rim and soaking into the parched earth. She was not accustomed to staring at men, had learned that looking too long brought unwanted attention. But something about this stranger made her forget her careful habits. He was perhaps 25, maybe 26, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never had to bow to anyone. He dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the ground with a solid thud. Then his eyes found her, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. She was thin, too thin, her dress little more than rags held together with careful stitching. Her light brown hair was pulled back in a braid that had seen better days, and her face, though young, already showed the weariness of hard labor. But her eyes, pale green like spring leaves, held something that all the hardship had not managed to break. "You work here?" His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting over mountain winds. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Need supplies. You able to help, or should I find someone else?" "I can help." The words came out barely above a whisper. She set down the bucket and wiped her wet hands on her dress, then led him inside the trading post. The proprietor, Cyrus Malone, was nowhere to be seen, probably sleeping off another afternoon drunk. That was fine with Penelope. It meant she could conduct the sale without him breathing down her neck, criticizing every move, finding fault where there was none. She moved behind the counter, grateful for the shade of the building, and waited while Ethan Quillan looked around with assessing eyes. Flour, salt, coffee, sugar. He listed items with the efficiency of someone who knew exactly what he needed. Ammunition for a Winchester, rope, dried beef if you have any that is not green. She gathered the items, moving quickly despite her exhaustion. She could feel his gaze on her as she worked, not leering like some men, but curious, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. When she placed the last item on the counter, a 20-pound sack of flour that she had to struggle to lift, he reached out and took it from her hands as if it weighed nothing. "You should not be hauling things like that." There was something in his voice, not pity exactly, but concern. "It is my job." "Job." He repeated the word as if tasting it and finding it bitter. "How much do I owe?" She calculated quickly in her head, adding up numbers that Malone had beaten into her memory. $11.30. Ethan pulled out a leather pouch and counted out gold coins, placing them on the counter. Then he paused, looking at her again with those storm gray eyes. When did you last eat something that was not scraps? The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure how to answer without revealing too much. I eat fine. That is not what I asked. He reached back into the pouch and pulled out another coin, a silver dollar. For you. Not for Malone or whoever owns this place. For you. She stared at the coin as if it were a snake. I cannot. Why not? Because he will know. He counts everything. If the ledger does not match, he will know I took it. Ethan's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath his beard. Then do not put it in the ledger. Hide it. Use it when you can get away. Before she could protest further, he placed the coin in her palm and closed her fingers around it. His hand was warm, calloused from hard work, and for a moment she felt something she had not felt in years. Safety. As if this stranger with his broad shoulders and quiet intensity could stand between her and all the hard edges of the world. Then the moment passed. He gathered his supplies, loading them into saddlebags with practiced efficiency. She watched from the doorway as he secured everything, part of her wanting him to leave quickly before Malone woke up, part of her desperately hoping he would stay a little longer. When he swung back into the saddle, he looked at her one more time. What is your name? Penelope. Penelope Vaughn? Penelope. He said it slowly, as if committing it to memory. I am Ethan Quillan. I trap in the mountains north of here, but I come through every few months for supplies. She nodded, not sure what to say, not sure why he was telling her this. Take care of yourself, Penelope Vaughn. Then he turned his horse and rode away, leaving her standing in the doorway with a silver dollar clutched in her hand and a strange ache in her chest. That night, after Malone had eaten the dinner she prepared and then complained about it, after he had locked the door to his quarters and left her alone in the storage room, she took out the silver dollar and looked at it by candlelight. It represented more money than she typically saw in a month. With it, she could buy herself a meal, maybe even a ribbon for her hair or a bar of soap that smelled like something other than lye. But even as she thought about these things, she knew she would not spend it. Not yet. She would save it. Hide it in the crack between two floorboards where she kept the few other coins she had managed to squirrel away over the years. Someday, maybe, she would have enough to leave this place, to go somewhere where people did not look through her as if she were made of glass. She fell asleep thinking about storm-gray eyes and the feeling of a warm hand closing around hers. 3 months passed. Summer gave way to autumn, and the brutal heat of Arizona began to ease into something almost bearable. Penelope continued her routine of hauling water, sweeping floors, serving customers, and sleeping in the storage room. Malone continued drinking, yelling, and paying her in bread that was more mold than flour. She continued hiding coins in the floorboards, though her hidden stash grew with painful slowness. She told herself she had forgotten about Ethan Quillan. Told herself that the mountain man was just another customer, no different from the miners and ranchers and drifters who passed through. But late at night, when the desert cooled and the coyotes howled in the distance, she found herself remembering the way he had lifted that flour sack as if it weighed nothing, the concern in his voice, the warmth of his hand. Then one morning in late October, she was sweeping the front step when she heard hoofbeats. She looked up, heart suddenly pounding, and there he was, Ethan Quillan, riding in with the sunrise at his back. Looking even more weathered than before, even more solid and real in a world that often felt like nothing but dust and heat and disappointment. He dismounted and walked toward her, and she saw something in his hands. A package, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Penelope Vaughn. He said her name like a greeting, like something important. Mr. Quillan. She leaned the broom against the wall, suddenly conscious of her ragged dress, her bare feet, the dirt smudged on her cheek. I brought you something. He held out the package. She stared at it, confused. Why? Because I wanted to. He pressed it into her hands when she did not immediately take it. Open it. Her fingers trembled as she untied the string, unfolded the paper. Inside was fabric, more fabric than she had ever seen in one place. It was the color of the sky just after sunset, a deep blue that seemed to shimmer even in the harsh morning light, and it was soft, so soft. She touched it with one finger, barely breathing, and realized what it was. Silk. She had heard of silk, heard other women talk about it in hushed, reverent tones, but she had never touched it, never imagined she would. It felt like water made solid, like something too beautiful to exist in the real world. I do not understand. She looked up at him, tears suddenly stinging her eyes. I was in Santa Fe last month. Saw this in a shop window. Made me think of you. He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable, as if he were unused to giving gifts, unused to showing kindness. Thought you might like to have something fine. I cannot accept this. But even as she said it, her fingers were clutching the fabric, unwilling to let go. You can. You will. He crossed his arms over his chest, and she could see the muscles in his forearms flex with the movement. Consider it payment for the fact that you were the only person in this godforsaken settlement who did not try to cheat me last time I was here. She wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she could not possibly keep something this valuable. But the words died in her throat. When had anyone ever given her anything beautiful? When had anyone ever thought of her when she was not standing right in front of them? Thank you. It came out as barely a whisper. Something softened in his expression, the hard edges easing. You are welcome. Now, I need supplies again. Same as before, more or less. They went inside, and this time Malone was awake, standing behind the counter with bloodshot eyes and the mean look he always had when his head was pounding from too much whiskey. He saw the package in Penelope's hands, and his eyes narrowed. What is that? Nothing. She tried to hide it behind her back, but Malone was already moving around the counter, reaching for it. If it is in my store, it is mine. What did you steal? She did not steal anything. Ethan's voice cut through the room like a knife. I gave it to her. Malone turned to look at him, taking in the broad shoulders, the weapons, the hard set of his jaw. For a moment, the proprietor seemed to reconsider. Then greed overcame caution. If you did business in my store, then I get a cut. That is how it works. That is not how anything works. Ethan took a step forward, and suddenly the room felt very small. I gave her a gift. It has nothing to do with you. She is my employee. Everything she has is because of me. Penelope felt sick. She should have known this would happen. Should have known that Malone would find a way to ruin anything good. She started to hand him the package, already mourning the loss. But Ethan moved faster. He placed himself between her and Malone, and when he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. Touch that, and I will break your hand. The silence that followed was absolute. Malone's face went red, then pale. He was not a young man, not a strong one, and he knew, they all knew, that Ethan could make good on the threat without breaking a sweat. Get out of my store, happily, but she's coming with me. Penelope's heart stopped. What? Ethan glanced back at her. You do not want to stay here, do you? She could not answer. Want had nothing to do with her life. Want was a luxury she could not afford. She has a contract. Malone found his courage again, hiding behind words. She works for me until her debt is paid. What debt? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Us room and board, food. I have been keeping her for 3 years. That is worth something. You have been keeping her? Ethan's laugh was bitter. Looks to me like she has been working herself to the bone while you drink your profits. How much does she owe? Malone's eyes darted, calculating. $50. It was an outrageous sum, a lie so obvious that even he seemed uncomfortable saying it. But it worked because the law, such as it was in the Arizona territory, often sided with property owners over workers, especially workers who were young and female and had no one to speak for them. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a roll of bills. He counted out $50 and threw it on the counter. There, debt paid. Penelope, get your things. She stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. This could not be real. Things like this did not happen to girls like her. Penelope. Ethan's voice was gentler now. Get your things. You do not belong here. She moved as if in a dream, going to the storage room, gathering the few possessions she owned. They fit in a small cloth bag, a change of clothes, both items as threadbare as what she was wearing. A comb with 3 broken teeth, the coins she had hidden in the floorboards. It took her less than 2 minutes to pack her entire life. When she came back, Ethan was still standing between her and Malone, a wall of muscle and quiet fury. He took her bag, then handed her the package of silk she had almost forgotten in the chaos. Ready? She nodded. They walked out together into the bright October morning. His horse was waiting, a big roan gelding with intelligent eyes. Ethan secured her bag to the saddle, then turned to her. You can ride? No. Then you will ride with me. It is 2 days to my cabin in the mountains. We will stop tonight at a way station I know. The woman who runs it is decent. You will be safe. Safe. The words seemed impossible. She looked back at the trading post, half expecting Malone to come running out, to drag her back, to make this all disappear like a cruel joke. But the door remained closed. Ethan mounted first, then reached down for her. Put your foot on mine and give me your hand. She did, and he lifted her up as if she weighed nothing, settling her in front of him on the saddle. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and she felt the solid wall of his chest against her back, the strength of his thighs on either side of hers. She had never been this close to a man, never felt so completely surrounded, and it should have been frightening, but somehow was not. Hold on to the saddle horn if you need to. His breath stirred her hair. I will not let you fall. Then they were moving, the horse carrying them away from the only life she had ever known, toward something vast and unknown. The desert stretched out in all directions, dotted with sagebrush and cacti, mountains rising purple in the distance. The sun climbed higher, turning the sky a brilliant blue that hurt to look at. And Penelope, who had never been more than 5 miles from Yuma, who had never imagined there could be anything beyond the daily struggle to survive, felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope. They rode in silence for the first hour. Penelope was acutely aware of every point where her body touched Ethan's, every shift of his weight, every breath. She was also aware of how strange this all was. She was riding off into the wilderness with a man she had met exactly twice, a man she knew almost nothing about. It was dangerous, possibly stupid, probably going to end badly. But what was the alternative? Stay with Malone until he worked her to death or sold her to someone worse. At least with Ethan, there was a chance. At least he had been kind. You must have questions. His voice rumbled through his chest and into her back. Many. Ask them. She thought about where to start. Why did you come back? Why did you bring me the silk? Because I could not stop thinking about you. He said it simply, as if it were a fact rather than a confession. I have been trapping these mountains for 6 years. I have seen hard things, done hard things. But something about you standing in that doorway with hunger in your eyes and pride in your spine, it stayed with me. I kept thinking that no one should have to live like that. Then I saw the silk in Santa Fe, and I knew I had to bring it to you. But you do not know me. I know enough. I know you are stronger than you think. I know you have been surviving in a place that wants to grind you to dust. I know you deserve better than what you have been given. Tears burned in her eyes again. She blinked them back, not wanting to cry, not wanting to show weakness. What happens now? Where are we going? To my cabin, like I said. It is up in the mountains, about 40 miles north. I have been living there for 6 years, ever since I left Missouri. It is rough, nothing fancy, but it is solid and warm, and there is plenty of food. You can stay there as long as you need. And then we figure out what comes next. Maybe you decide to head to California. Try your luck there. Maybe you decide to stay in Arizona, find work somewhere better than that hellhole. Or maybe... He trailed off. Maybe what? Maybe you decide you do not mind the mountains, that you do not mind the company. He shifted slightly, and she felt the strength in his arms as he adjusted the reins. But that is getting ahead of things. First, we get you somewhere safe. Then we talk about the future. They rode on, and as the sun climbed higher, the temperature began to rise despite the autumn season. Penelope's throat grew dry, but she did not complain. She had gone without water for longer than this. But Ethan noticed anyway. He always seemed to notice. Thirsty? A little. He guided the horse to a stop near a cluster of rocks and dismounted, then helped her down. Her legs were shaky from the unfamiliar position, and she nearly stumbled, but his hands steadied her. He pulled a canteen from the saddle and handed it to her. Drink, we have plenty. The water was warm but tasted like heaven. She forced herself to drink slowly, not wanting to seem greedy. When she handed it back, he took a long drink himself, his throat working, and she found herself watching the movement, fascinated by the simple act. We will reach the way station by nightfall. He capped the canteen. Martha runs it, has for about 10 years. She is tough but fair. You will like her. You are sure she will not mind? I am sure. He helped her back onto the horse, then swung up behind her. She has a soft spot for anyone who has been knocked around by life. They rode on, and slowly, Penelope began to relax into the rhythm of the horse's gait, into the warmth of the sun and the steady presence of the man behind her. The landscape changed gradually as they moved north, the flat desert giving way to rolling hills, the sagebrush interspersed with juniper and piñon pine. The air smelled different here, cleaner somehow, less heavy with dust and desperation. Tell me about Missouri. She surprised herself by asking. Not much to tell. Grew up on a farm, 5th of 6 children. When I was 19, my father died, and my older brother inherited everything. He made it clear there was no place for the rest of us. So I headed west, same as half the men in this territory. Do you miss it? Your family? Sometimes. Mostly I miss my mother. She was a good woman. Died 2 years after my father. I got the letter 6 months late, could not even go back for the funeral. He was quiet for a moment. What about you? Where's your family? Dead. The word came out flat, emotionless. My parents died of fever when I was 12. I had no other relatives, or none who would claim me. Malone took me in, said he would give me work and a place to stay. I did not realize until later that I had made a deal with the devil. 7 years. Ethan's voice was tight. You have been there for 7 years? Yes. Christ. He exhaled hard. You should have run. I thought about it. Every day, I thought about it. But where would I go? How would I eat? At least with Malone, I had a roof and food, even if both were barely adequate. She looked down at her hands, at the calluses and scars. I know it seems cowardly staying. It does not seem cowardly. It seems practical. Survival is not cowardice. His arms tightened fractionally around her. But you are free of him now. That is what matters. They reached the way station as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that looked almost unreal. The station was a low adobe building with a stable and a corral, set in a small valley where a creek ran year-round. Smoke curled from the chimney, and as they rode up, a woman emerged from the doorway. Martha was in her 50s, broad-shouldered and gray-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Ethan, then at Penelope, and something in her expression softened. Ethan Quillan. Been a while. That it has. He dismounted and helped Penelope down, then began unsaddling the horse. Need lodging for the night? 2 rooms, if you have them. Martha's eyes flicked between them again. I have them. Supper is in an hour. Get your horse settled and come inside. The room Penelope was given was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the creek. There was a pitcher of water and a basin, and when she poured the water and washed her face, she felt some of the dust and exhaustion begin to lift. She looked at herself in the small mirror hanging on the wall and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes seemed brighter somehow, less dead than they had been that morning. Supper was beef stew with vegetables and bread that was fresh and soft. Penelope ate slowly, trying to make it last, trying to commit every bite to memory. Martha watched her with knowing eyes, but said nothing until the meal was finished, and Ethan had excused himself to check on the horse one more time. He is a good man, Martha said quietly, in case you were wondering. Penelope looked up, startled. I was not. Yes, you were, and that is smart. Women have to wonder, have to be careful. Martha poured them both coffee, strong and black. But Ethan is one of the few who can be trusted. I have known him for 6 years, and I have never seen him do a dishonorable thing. He paid $50 for me, for my debt. Penelope wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. That is a lot of money. It is, but he has it. Trapping has been good to him, and I suspect he thinks you are worth it. He does not even know me. Maybe not. But he knows what it looks like when someone is drowning. He pulled you out. Now you get to decide what to do with your life. Martha leaned back in her chair. Where is he taking you? To his cabin. He said I could stay as long as I need. And you believe him? Penelope thought about it, about the way he had stood between her and Malone, about the silk, about the gentle way he had lifted her onto the horse. Yes, I believe him. Martha nodded, satisfied. Good. Trust your instincts. They will keep you alive out here. When Ethan came back inside, his hair was damp from the creek, and he had changed into a clean shirt. He looked younger somehow, less weathered, though his eyes still held that watchful quality, as if he were always assessing threats, always ready to act. He sat down at the table and accepted the coffee Martha poured for him. Martha has been filling me in on the local gossip. He took a sip. Apparently, there was a lynching in Prescott last month. 3 men accused of stealing cattle. Were they guilty? Penelope asked. No one knows. No one cared to find out. Martha's voice was bitter. That is how things work in these parts. Accusation is as good as conviction if you are on the wrong side of power. They talked for a while longer, the conversation drifting to weather and trade routes and the rumors of a railroad coming through within the next few years. Penelope mostly listened, soaking in the rhythm of normal conversation, the feeling of sitting at a table with people who were not yelling or drunk or cruel. It was such a small thing, but it felt monumental. Eventually, Martha stood and began clearing the dishes. Penelope rose to help, but the older woman waved her off. You are a guest tonight. Go rest. You look like you could sleep for a week. Penelope wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. She said goodnight and went to her room, closing the door behind her. She sat on the bed, still not quite believing it was real, that she was here, that she was free. The package of silk was sitting on the small table by the window, and she unwrapped it again, running her fingers over the fabric in the fading light. She had never felt anything like it. Smooth and cool and impossibly soft. She held it up to her cheek, closed her eyes, and tried to imagine what it would be like to wear a dress made from this fabric. To walk down a street and feel it swirl around her legs. To be someone who deserved beautiful things. A knock on the door made her jump. She quickly wrapped the silk back up and opened the door to find Ethan standing there, holding something small in his hand. I forgot to give you this earlier. He held it out, and she saw that it was a bar of chocolate, dark and glossy, wrapped in paper. I know I said I bought you the silk in Santa Fe. I also bought you this. Thought you might like it. She took it, staring at it in wonder. I have never had chocolate. His eyebrows rose. Never? Never. I have heard of it, but I have never seen it in person, much less tasted it. Something shifted in his expression, something tender and sad at the same time. Then I'm glad I brought it. Go ahead, try it. She unwrapped the paper with careful fingers, revealing the dark square beneath. It smelled rich and foreign, like nothing she had encountered before. She broke off a small piece and placed it on her tongue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chocolate began to melt, and the taste flooded her mouth. Sweet and bitter and complex, 100 flavors in one. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Ethan watched her, and something in his eyes made her chest tighten. Good. Good. She could not find words to describe it properly, so she settled for the inadequate one. Thank you. For this. For everything. You do not have to keep thanking me. I do. Because no one has ever been this kind to me. She looked down at the chocolate, at the silk on the table, at the clean room and the full stomach and the promise of sleep in a real bed. I do not understand why you are doing this. He was silent for a moment, as if weighing his words. I told you before. I could not stop thinking about you, about how no one should have to live the way you were living. But it is more than that. He leaned against the doorframe, his broad shoulders filling the space. I have been alone in these mountains for a long time. It is a good life in many ways, but it is lonely. When I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. Two people who have been on their own for too long. Maybe I am being selfish, pulling you into my world. But I hope I am also giving you a chance at something better. Penelope felt her pulse quicken. What happens tomorrow, when we reach your cabin? Tomorrow you rest, you eat. You start to remember what it feels like to not be afraid all the time. He straightened up, preparing to leave. And we take it one day at a time from there. No expectations, no demands. Just two people trying to figure out how to live. He said goodnight and disappeared down the hall, leaving her alone with the chocolate and the silk and a strange, fierce longing she did not have a name for. She finished the chocolate slowly, savoring each bite, then undressed and climbed into bed. The sheets were clean and smelled of soap, and the mattress, though thin, was softer than the floor she had been sleeping on for 7 years. She fell asleep quickly, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she did not dream of running. They left the way station at dawn, after a breakfast of eggs and biscuits that Martha pressed on them, along with a package of supplies for the journey. Ethan tried to pay, but Martha refused, saying that his company over supper had been payment enough. Penelope suspected that the older woman was simply being kind, but she did not argue. She had learned that sometimes you just had to accept kindness when it was offered, even if you did not understand why it was being given. The ride into the mountains was different from the desert crossing. The air grew cooler as they climbed, the vegetation thicker. Ponderosa pines replaced the juniper and piñon, their trunks tall and straight, their needles carpeting the ground. Penelope could hear water running somewhere nearby, a sound that was both alien and beautiful to someone who had spent her life in the desert. "It is incredible," she said, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. "Wait until you see the cabin." There was a note of pride in his voice. "I built it myself, with timber from these very woods. It is not big, but it is solid. Keeps out the cold in winter and stays cool in summer." They rode for most of the day, stopping occasionally to rest the horse and stretch their legs. Ethan pointed out landmarks, showing her the trail so she would be able to find her way if she needed to. He showed her where the best fishing spots were in the creek, where the deer came to drink at dawn, where the bears sometimes denned in winter. It was clear that he loved this land, that he had made it his own through years of hard-won knowledge. The cabin appeared in late afternoon, set in a small clearing surrounded by pines. It was larger than Penelope had expected, built from logs chinked with mud and moss, with a stone chimney rising from one side and a covered porch along the front. There was a small barn for the horse and a storage shed for furs and supplies. A vegetable garden, now mostly finished for the season, lay to one side, and beyond it, the creek ran clear and cold. Home. Ethan dismounted and helped her down, then began unsaddling the horse. "Come on, I will show you inside." The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, but as her eyes adjusted, Penelope saw a single large room with a stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a small kitchen area, and a bed built into one corner. Furs and skins hung on the walls, both for insulation and decoration. The space was clean, almost austere, but it felt solid and safe in a way the trading post never had. "There is only one bed." Ethan set her bag down near the door, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "I will sleep on the floor or outside if the weather holds. I cannot take your bed. You can and you will. I have slept in worse places." He moved to the fireplace and began building a fire, his movements efficient and practiced. "Tomorrow, I will start building a second room. It will not be fancy, but it will give you privacy. You do not have to do that." "I want to." He glanced at her, flames beginning to catch in the kindling. "I want you to feel like you have a place here. A real place, not just somewhere you are passing through." She did not know what to say to that, did not know how to process the idea that someone wanted her to stay. that someone was willing to build her a room to make space for her in his life. So she simply nodded and began looking around, taking in the details of the place that might become her home. Over the following days, Penelope began to settle into a rhythm. She woke with the sun and helped Ethan with the morning chores, learning how to care for the horse, how to feed the chickens he kept in a small coop, how to collect water from the creek. He taught her how to fish, how to set snares for rabbits, how to identify edible plants and which ones to avoid. She was a quick study, soaking up information the way the dry earth soaked up rain. In return, she took over the cooking and cleaning, tasks she knew well from her years at the trading post. But here it felt different. She was not cooking for someone who would criticize every meal. She was cooking for someone who thanked her, who ate with obvious enjoyment, who sometimes closed his eyes after the first bite and sighed with satisfaction. It made her want to cook better, to experiment with the supplies he had, to see if she could make him smile. And he did smile. More and more as the days passed. She learned that he had a quiet sense of humor, that he liked to tell stories about his trapping adventures, that he sang to himself when he thought no one was listening. She learned that he was patient and steady, that he never raised his voice, that he moved through the world with a calm confidence that came from knowing he could handle whatever it threw at him. She also learned that he was building her a room, just as he had promised. He worked on it every day, cutting and hauling timber, fitting logs, chinking gaps. It was back-breaking labor, but he never complained. Sometimes she would bring him water and watch him work, marveling at the strength in his arms, the way his muscles flexed and bunched with each swing of the axe. He had rolled up his sleeves and tied his hair back, and there was something almost hypnotic about watching him, about seeing raw power harnessed to purpose. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after they had arrived at the cabin, she was working on making bread when he came inside, covered in sawdust and sweat. He went to the basin and washed his face and hands, then poured himself a cup of water from the pitcher. The room will be finished in a few more days. He leaned against the counter, watching her knead dough. Then you will have your own space. You have been working so hard on it. I feel guilty. Do not. He took a drink. I like building things. Makes me feel useful. You are useful. You saved me. You saved yourself. You survived 7 years in a place that would have broken most people. I just gave you a ride out. He set down the cup and moved closer, close enough that she could smell the pine sap and honest sweat on his skin. Penelope, I need to ask you something. Her heart kicked up. What? Are you happy here? I know it is not what you are used to, and it is isolated, and there are no other women around for company. But are you happy? She stopped kneading and looked at him, really looked at him, at the concern in his storm-gray eyes, at the way he held himself carefully, as if bracing for rejection. I am happier than I have ever been. Something eased in his expression. Good. That is good. Can I ask you something now? She wiped her hands on a rag, gathering courage. Anything. Why did you really bring me here? And do not tell me it is because you could not stop thinking about me or because you saw someone who needed help. There is more to it than that. He was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his hair, dislodging the tie so that it fell around his shoulders. You are right. There is more. He moved to the fireplace, staring into the flames. I have been alone for a long time. By choice, mostly. After I left Missouri, I decided I was better off without complications, without connections that could be used against me or that I could screw up. I built this life in the mountains, and it was good. It was enough. He paused, and she waited. sensing that he needed time to find the words. "Then I saw you," he continued, "standing in that doorway, so thin I could probably count your ribs, wearing rags, but with your chin up and your eyes clear. And something in me just broke open. I realized that I had been lying to myself, that my life was not enough, that I was lonely in ways I had not let myself acknowledge." He turned to look at her. "I brought you here because I needed you as much as you needed me. Maybe more." The honesty of it stole her breath. She had expected deflection, maybe a charming smile and a change of subject. But Ethan Quillan did not seem capable of dishonesty, not about things that mattered. "I needed you too," she said quietly. "I still need you. I do not know how to live in the world, not really. I have only ever known how to survive. But you are teaching me that there is a difference." He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and took her hands in his grip warm and firm. "Then we will teach each other. You will teach me how not to be alone. I will teach you how to be free." He hesitated, then added, "If you want that, if you want to stay." "I want to stay." She said it without hesitation, without doubt. "For as long as you will have me." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, and she realized with a jolt that she was falling in love with him. Maybe had already fallen. It was terrifying and exhilarating and unlike anything she had ever felt. She wanted to reach up and touch his face, to trace the line of his jaw, to see if his beard was as soft as it looked. But before she could move, he released her hands and stepped back, his expression turning almost shy. "I should get back to work. The sooner the room is done, the sooner you will have privacy." "Ethan." She stopped him before he could leave. "I do not need privacy from you." He looked at her for a long moment, something heated and intense flickering in his eyes. Then he nodded once and went back outside, leaving her alone with the bread dough and a racing heart. The room was finished 4 days later, just as the first snow of the season began to fall. It was small but well built, with a narrow bed, a chest for her belongings, and a window that looked out over the creek. Ethan had even built her a shelf for the few things she owned. When he showed it to her, she almost cried. "It is perfect. It is a room, but it is yours." He leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore the space. "I put extra furs on the bed. It will get cold at night." She set down the package of silk, which she had carefully stored and had not yet decided what to do with. Then she turned to him, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I do not want to sleep in here." His eyebrows rose. "No?" "No. I want to sleep out there by the fire. With you." She felt her cheeks heat but forced herself to continue. "I spent 7 years sleeping alone in a storage room, cold and afraid. I do not want to be alone anymore. I want to fall asleep knowing you are nearby. I want to wake up and see you first thing. I want—" She trailed off, not sure how to articulate the depth of what she wanted. Ethan closed the distance between them, his eyes searching hers. "Penelope, are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I do not know what you think I am saying." "I think you are saying that you want to be with me. Not just living in the same cabin, but together, as partners, as—" He stopped, as if afraid to voice the word. "As husband and wife?" She finished for him, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break free from her chest. "Yes, that is what I am saying, if you want that too." "If I want—" He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Penelope, I have wanted that since the moment I lifted you onto my horse. I just did not think you would want it. did not think I had the right to ask. You have every right. You are the only person who has ever treated me like I matter. The only person who has ever given me choices instead of orders. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. He cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough and warm against her skin. Then I am choosing you too, for as long as you will have me. He kissed her then, gently at first, as if afraid she might break. But when she leaned into him, her hands gripping his shirt, he deepened the kiss. Pulling her close, she felt the strength of him, the solidness, and it was better than chocolate, better than silk, better than anything she could have imagined. This was what it felt like to be wanted, to be cherished, to be home. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. We should do this properly. I should ride into Prescott, find a preacher, make it legal. We do not need a preacher to make this real. She tightened her grip on his shirt. We can go later if you want. But right now, I just need you to promise me that this is real. That you are not going to wake up tomorrow and decide you made a mistake. I am not going to wake up tomorrow and decide I made a mistake. He opened his eyes. They were fierce with certainty. I am going to wake up tomorrow, grateful that I took a detour through Yuma 3 months ago. That I saw you in that doorway. That I had the courage to come back. He kissed her again, softer this time. You are the best decision I have ever made. They spent the rest of the evening by the fire, wrapped in furs, talking about the future. Ethan explained that his trapping season was about to begin, that he would be gone for days at a time, checking his lines. He worried about leaving her alone, but she assured him she would be fine. She had survived 7 years with Malone. She could handle a few days alone in a well-stocked cabin. Besides, she said, snuggled against his chest, his arms solid around her, I have things to do. I want to make myself a dress from that silk. I want to learn how to shoot a rifle. I want to explore the area around the cabin. I will not be idle. I do not doubt that. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You are the least idle person I have ever met. That night, they slept together in his bed, fully clothed, wrapped in each other's arms. It was chaste and innocent, and the most intimate thing Penelope had ever experienced. She fell asleep listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling safer than she had in her entire life. The next morning, they began their life together in earnest. Ethan taught her how to shoot, standing behind her to adjust her stance, his hands guiding hers on the rifle. She was a natural, her aim steady, and he praised her with genuine pride. She taught him how to make bread that was soft and fluffy, not the hard tack he had been living on for years. They laughed together when her first attempt at frying trout turned into charred fish, and they celebrated when his attempt at mending a torn shirt was actually successful. 3 weeks later, on a cold December morning, they rode into Prescott together. The town was larger than Yuma, more established, with real streets and proper buildings. Penelope felt out of place in her patched dress and worn shawl, but Ethan held her hand and led her through the streets as if she were a queen. They found a preacher and stood before him in a small church, speaking vows with only a curious clerk as witness. Ethan had bought her a simple gold band from the general store, and when he slipped it onto her finger, she felt something lock into place inside her. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I will protect you and provide for you and honor you for as long as I live. I love you, she replied, tears streaming down her face. I will stand with you and build a life with you and be grateful for you for as long as I live. The preacher pronounced them man and wife. and Ethan kissed her with a passion that made the clerk cough and look away. Then they walked out into the cold December day as Ethan and Penelope Quillan, bound together in law and in heart. They spent the rest of the day in town, and Ethan insisted on buying her new clothes. A sturdy wool dress in deep green, a warm cloak, a pair of boots that actually fit. When she protested that it was too much, he simply shook his head. "You are my wife now. I take care of what is mine." They also stopped at the general store, and Ethan bought her more chocolate, a whole box of it, and a bolt of cream-colored lace to go with the blue silk. "For your wedding dress," he said. "I know you probably want something fancier than what you wore today." She did make a dress from the silk, working on it through the long winter months while Ethan ran his trap lines. She had never sewn anything so fine before, and her stitches were careful and precise, each one a small prayer of gratitude. She trimmed it with the lace, creating a neckline that was modest but beautiful. And when she finally tried it on in early spring, she felt like someone from a fairy tale. Ethan came home from checking his traps and froze in the doorway when he saw her. "Penelope." Her name was a reverent whisper. Do you like it?" She turned in a slow circle, the silk swirling around her legs. "Like it?" "I am speechless." He set down his rifle and came to her, his hands settling on her waist. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." "It is the dress. It is you." He kissed her, and this time there was nothing chaste about it. They had been married for months, had shared a bed and built a life, but there was still something new and wondrous about touching each other, about the way their bodies fit together. "Wear this tonight. We will have our own private celebration." She did wear it that night, and they celebrated by the fire, the silk pooling around them as he undressed her slowly, reverently, his hands and mouth learning every inch of her. She had never known that her body could feel such things, that pleasure could be this overwhelming. When they finally came together, it was with a sense of rightness that went beyond the physical, a joining of souls as much as bodies. Afterward, lying in his arms with the fire crackling and the wind howling outside, she traced patterns on his chest. "I never thought I could be this happy." "Neither did I." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You have given me everything, Penelope. A reason to come home, a reason to build something that lasts. You have given me everything too. Freedom, safety, love." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "I want to give you more. I want to give you a family." Something flickered in his eyes, hope and fear mingling. "A family?" "Children, if we are blessed with them." She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "Do you want that?" "I want that more than I knew how to say." He pulled her back down against him, holding her tight. "I want to see you grow round with our child. I want to teach our sons and daughters how to survive in these mountains. I want to build something that outlasts us both." "Then we will." She kissed his chest, right over his heart. "We will build a family and a future. Together." Spring turned to summer, and the mountains came alive with color and life. Penelope planted a garden, expanding the small plot Ethan had maintained, adding vegetables and herbs she had learned about from books he brought back from town. She also learned how to preserve food for the winter, how to smoke meat and put up jam and dry fruit. Ethan built her a proper kitchen with a real stove that he hauled up from Prescott in pieces and assembled with patience and skill. In August, she realized her monthly courses had stopped. She waited another month, not wanting to say anything until she was sure. But when September arrived and there was still no sign, she knew. She was pregnant. She told Ethan on a warm evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "I have news." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." He went very still, his eyes widening. "A baby?" "Yes, probably in late March or early April." He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. "Penelope, my Penelope, you have made me the happiest man alive." "Then we are even, because you have made me the happiest woman." The pregnancy was uneventful, and Penelope thrived. Ethan hovered over her constantly, worrying about every little thing, but she reassured him that she was strong, that she felt good. He expanded the cabin again, building a small nursery adjacent to their bedroom. Furnishing it with a cradle he carved himself and blankets she sewed from soft wool. They prepared together, gathering supplies, making plans, dreaming about the child they would soon meet. In late March, as the snow began to melt and the first wildflowers appeared, Penelope went into labor. Ethan had arranged for a midwife from Prescott to come stay with them for a few weeks, and the woman arrived just in time. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Ethan thought he would lose his mind from helplessness, from hearing Penelope cry out and not being able to do anything to ease her pain. But she was strong, stronger than he had ever imagined. And when the sun rose the next morning, their son was born. Ethan held the baby with shaking hands, marveling at the tiny fingers, the perfect features, the shock of dark hair. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. I cannot believe this is real. He needs a name." Penelope was exhausted but smiling, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes shining. "What do you want to call him?" "Something strong. Something that means he will never be afraid." She thought for a moment. "Elijah Quillan." "Elijah." Ethan tested the name and found it good. "Welcome to the world, Elijah." The first year of Elijah's life was both exhausting and magical. Penelope and Ethan learned how to be parents, how to soothe a crying baby, how to function on very little sleep, how to marvel at every tiny milestone. Ethan was a devoted father, often taking the baby so Penelope could rest, walking the floor at night when Elijah was fussy, singing to him in a deep, rumbling voice that never failed to calm the child. As Elijah grew, so did their family. Penelope became pregnant again when their son was 18 months old. And this time the pregnancy was easier, as if her body remembered what to do. Their second child, a daughter they named Emily, arrived in early winter during the first snowfall. She had Penelope's green eyes and a temperament that was sunny and easy. Ethan declared that he was outnumbered by beauty and that he could not be happier about it. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Elijah grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, learning to trap and hunt and track. Emily was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love for plants and animals that reminded Ethan of Penelope. 2 years after Emily, they welcomed another son, Everett, who was loud and bold and always getting into mischief. The cabin, which had once seemed spacious, now echoed with laughter and the chaos of 3 children. Penelope sometimes stood on the porch and looked out over the mountains, marveling at how her life had changed. She was no longer the frightened, half-starved girl who had worked at a trading post. She was a wife, a mother, a woman who knew her own worth. She had learned to shoot and fish and ride. She had learned to read and write, taught by Ethan during long winter evenings. She had learned that love was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced, nurtured, protected. And Ethan, who had once been a solitary mountain man, had become the heart of a thriving family. He still trapped, still spent time in the wilderness, But he always came home, always returned to the cabin where Penelope waited, where his children laughed and played, where warmth and love filled every corner. He had built something that would outlast him, something that mattered. One evening, 10 years after he had first ridden into that settlement outside Yuma, Ethan sat on the porch with Penelope. The children were asleep inside, worn out from a day of playing in the creek. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. "Do you ever regret it?" Penelope asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "Giving up your solitude, taking on a wife and children?" "Not for a single second." He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I was surviving before. Now I am living. I feel the same. You gave me everything, Ethan. A home, a family, a life worth living." She lifted her head to look at him. "You brought me silk and chocolate and showed me that there was more to the world than hardship. You gave me a reason to smile. You smile a lot now. Because of you. Because of this life we have built." She kissed him, soft and sweet. "I love you, Ethan Quillan. I will love you until the day I die. And I love you, Penelope Quillan. You are my heart, my home, my everything." They sat together as the stars came out, the mountains standing sentinel around them, the future stretching bright and promising before them. Penelope had never tasted chocolate or felt silk before Ethan brought them to her, and he had watched her smile with wonder and joy. But the greatest gift he had given her was not found in luxuries or fine things. It was found in his steadfast presence, his unwavering love, his commitment to building a life together. And in return, she had given him the same. Years continued to roll by like the seasons, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Elijah grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet confidence and steady hands. He learned the trap lines, learned the mountains, and began to dream of starting his own life. Emily developed a gift for healing, learning which plants could cure ailments and which could cause harm. She often accompanied Ethan into town, where she would sit with the doctor and absorb everything he taught her. Everett, true to his adventurous nature, talked constantly of seeing what lay beyond the mountains, of traveling to California or even farther. Penelope and Ethan watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that time was passing, that the small hands they had once held were becoming capable of holding others. But they also found joy in the quiet moments, in the evenings when the family gathered around the fire and shared stories, in the mornings when they woke together and greeted another day. When Elijah was 20, he brought home a young woman he had met in Prescott. Her name was Sarah, and she had the kind of quiet strength that reminded Ethan of Penelope. He knew, watching his son's face as he looked at Sarah, that this was serious, that Elijah had found what Ethan himself had found all those years ago in a settlement outside Yuma. "She is wonderful," Penelope said that night, after Sarah and her family had left, following a dinner that had lasted hours. "He loves her." "He does." Ethan pulled her close, remembering what it felt like to be young and in love, to feel as though the whole world was contained in one person's smile. It will be strange having him gone, starting his own family. He's not going far. They plan to build nearby. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "We will have grandchildren soon, Ethan. Can you imagine?" He could imagine. Could picture a new generation playing in the same creek where his children had played, learning the same lessons, carrying on the legacy of love and hard work and resilience that he and Penelope had built together. Elijah and Sarah married the following spring, and true to their word, they built a cabin just a few miles from Ethan and Penelope's home. Emily, meanwhile, had become the closest thing the area had to a trained nurse, and people came from miles around seeking her help. She was courted by several young men, but she was particular, telling her parents that she would only marry someone who understood that her calling was important, that she would not give up helping people just because she became a wife. Everett left for California when he turned 18, promising to write and visit. His letters arrived sporadically, filled with tales of San Francisco and the ocean and opportunities that seemed too good to be true. Penelope worried about him, but Ethan reassured her that their youngest son had inherited both their stubbornness and their ability to survive. He would be fine. As their children built their own lives, Ethan and Penelope found themselves returning to the quiet rhythm of their early years together. They spent mornings working side by side in the garden or tending to the animals. They spent afternoons fishing or hiking through the mountains they both loved. They spent evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing, content in the companionship that had only deepened with time. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Penelope with a trip to Santa Fe. It was the farthest she had ever traveled, and she was nervous but excited. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, walked through markets filled with goods from all over the world. And Ethan bought her another length of silk, this one the color of sunset, along with a box of the finest chocolates he could find. "You are still trying to see me smile," she said, laughing as she bit into a chocolate filled with caramel. "I will never stop trying to see you smile." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band she had worn for 2 decades. "You are as beautiful to me now as you were the first time I saw you. More beautiful, because I know you now. I know your strength and your kindness and your capacity for love. And you are as beautiful to me now as you were when you rode into that settlement on your wild horse, looking like you had been carved from the mountains themselves." She squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Ethan, for all of it. For the silk and the chocolate and the life we have built. For loving me when I did not know how to be loved. Thank you for teaching me that I did not have to be alone, that there was more to life than survival." He leaned across the table and kissed her, not caring that they were in public, not caring about anything except this woman who had changed everything. They returned to the mountains renewed, recommitted, ready for whatever came next. And what came next was grandchildren. Elijah and Sarah had 3 children in quick succession, 2 girls and a boy, and the cabin once again filled with the sound of young voices. Emily eventually married a widower from Prescott, a man with 2 children of his own who respected her work and supported her passion for healing. Even Everett returned from California, bringing with him a wife and stories that kept the family entertained for months. Penelope and Ethan became the anchors of a growing family, the elders who everyone turned to for advice or comfort, or simply to hear the story of how they met. And they told it often, the tale of a mountain man who saw a girl in a doorway and decided she deserved better, who brought her silk and chocolate and watched her smile, who gave her a life she never could have imagined. As they grew older, the mountains seemed less steep, the winters less harsh, not because anything had changed, but because they faced it all together, supported by the family they had created, the love and they had nurtured. Ethan's hair went gray, his body still strong but slower. Penelope's face gained lines, each one earned through years of laughter and work and life lived fully. They spent their final years exactly as they had spent their first, side by side, hand in hand, grateful for each moment. And when Ethan passed first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. Penelope grieved, but did not break. She had learned long ago that she was strong, that she could survive anything. But she also knew that she would not have to survive alone for long. She lived another 2 years, long enough to see all her grandchildren grown, long enough to hold her first great-grandchild, long enough to stand on the porch one last time and look out over the mountains that had been her home for more than 5 decades. Then, on a spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming and the creek was running high with snow melt, she simply did not wake up. They buried her next to Ethan in a plot overlooking the valley, under the shade of the pines they had both loved. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren stood together, a testament to the love that had started with a mountain man and a half-starved girl in a settlement outside Yuma. And though Ethan and Penelope were gone, their legacy lived on in the strength and kindness and resilience of those they had raised. In the stories that would be told for generations, in the proof that love, real love, could transform everything. The cabin still stood, maintained now by Elijah's family, a place where the Quillans gathered for holidays and celebrations. The silk dress Penelope had made hung carefully preserved in a cedar chest, pulled out occasionally so that young brides in the family could wear something borrowed from the woman who had started it all. And every year, on the anniversary of Ethan and Penelope's meeting, someone would place a bar of chocolate and a scrap of silk on their graves, small tokens of remembrance for the couple who had shown them all what it meant to love completely, to give generously, to build something that lasted. In the end, the story of Ethan Quillan and Penelope Vaughn was simple. A mountain man saw a woman who needed saving. A woman saw a man who needed a reason to come home. They found each other in the harsh landscape of the Arizona Territory in 1878. And they built a life that was anything but simple. They faced hardship and joy, loss and gain, the everyday challenges of survival in a wild place. But through it all, they had each other. He had brought her silk and chocolate, luxuries she had never known, and watched her smile with wonder. But more than that, he had brought her safety and love, and the freedom to become who she was meant to be. And she had brought him home, had filled his solitary cabin with laughter and warmth, and the kind of love that made every hardship worthwhile. Their story did not end with grand gestures or dramatic rescues. It ended the way the best stories do, with two people who chose each other every single day, who built a family and a legacy, who proved that sometimes the greatest adventures are the quiet ones, the ones that unfold over decades rather than moments. And if you were to visit that valley in the mountains north of Yuma, you would find their graves still tended, their cabins still standing, and their families still thriving. You would hear the stories, passed down through generations, of a mountain man who brought silk and chocolate to a girl who had never known such things, who watched her smile and fell in love, who spent the rest of his life making sure she never stopped smiling. You would hear about Penelope, who went from barefoot and desperate to strong and cherished, who raised a family and helped build a community, who proved that survival was only the beginning, that once you found someone who saw your worth, who gave you room to grow, you could do more than just survive. You could thrive. Their story was one of redemption and transformation, of two lonely people who found each other against all odds. It was a love story in the truest sense. Not because it was easy or perfect, but because it was real. Because they chose each other, not just once, but over and over again, through every season and every challenge. And in the end, that is what mattered. Not the silk or the chocolate, though those were symbols of something deeper. not even the cabin or the family, though those were the fruits of their love. What mattered was the choice they made every single day to love each other well, to protect and honor and cherish, to build something beautiful in a harsh world. Ethan and Penelope Quillan lived and loved and left behind a legacy that would never be forgotten. They proved that even in the wild, unforgiving landscape of the Old West, love could flourish, that two broken people could heal each other, that a mountain man and a desperate girl could find each other and build something extraordinary. Their story became legend in that part of Arizona, told around fires and dinner tables, embroidered with each retelling, but always holding the same truth at its core. Love transforms. Love endures. Love, when given freely and received gratefully, can change the course of two lives and echo through generations. So when people asked what became of Ethan Quillan and Penelope Vaughn, the answer was simple. They loved each other. They built a life together. They raised a family that carried their values forward. They grew old side by side, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy. And when they finally rested beneath the pines they had loved, they left behind a world that was better for their presence. They left behind children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who knew what real love looked like. They left behind a story that would be told and retold, a reminder that kindness matters, that seeing someone's worth matters, that choosing to love, even when it is hard, matters. The mountain man had ridden into a settlement one day and seen a girl who needed saving. The girl had looked at a stranger and seen possibility. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone. Together, they had proven that the Wild West was not just a place of hardship and survival, but also a place where love could take root and flourish. In the end, Ethan brought Penelope silk and chocolate, and he watched her smile. But the real gift was everything that came after. The life they built, the love they shared, the legacy they left behind. That was the true story, and it was better than any fairy tale because it was real, lived out in hard work and tender moments, in the mountains of Arizona where two lonely souls found their home in each other.